that's kind of funny. It makes me think we should mention, in case people were wondering this, COVID does not exist in the Ambition universe. It never happens because, like, can you imagine, like, trying to explain, like, they can't go on a school trip to the UK if there's COVID. They can't leave their houses if there's COVID. Like, it was just too much. Like, I was like, they live in a different universe. We can't acknowledge this because it would just complicate everything.
Yeah, and it's just so much more escapist this way as well. And and also
right.
just writing, like, he took off his mask like 80 billion times. Like, no.
Oh my god, that would be funny. I mean, they're trying to, like, sing and they're, like, wearing their masks. Yeah, no, it just...
No.
It does not match with the universe of the show. We can have one thing that's not COVID.
Yeah, we can and we should. We deserve it.
Hello, everybody. It is another beautiful Ambition Saturday, Sunday, and it's time for your favorite podcast. I'm Maggie.
And I'm Maddie.
And this is...
Ambition Unpacked.
Heck yeah. It is. It is a beautiful... Actually, it's not really beautiful here. It's it should have been snowing the last time we recorded. It's randomly snowing today in March, middle of March. There's snow on the ground. I mean, like, yes and no. Like, it's not completely out of the realm of believability for it to snow in the middle of March in, like, the northeastern corridor of the U.S., but...
Yeah.
It's not like, yeah, we always expect there to be snow in March, especially because last week it was so nice. It was, like, in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, this is very, like, special snowflakes mood, and we're no longer in that mode, so...
Yeah.
We are moving on. We've moved past the happy holidays of 104. We are now going into the 5th episode of the first season.
It's the sad not holidays. We are back to being tense and angry.
Yes. We're very tense this episode. We really just jumped right back into that. No holds barred on that front. I have our stats here, but before we jump too deep in, Maddie and I wanted to just quickly kind of explain a little shift that we're doing in the show where, as everybody knows, the episodes this is the shortest episode. Actually, it's the shortest episode in the whole show. But after this, no longer will there be shorter episodes. We're starting to amp up our word count, and as people who read the show knows, the episodes get very long. So we are going to try our best to be a little more streamlined, not in terms of, like, the stuff we discuss, but, like, not recapping every single moment of an episode. Like, if we don't have anything to say about a scene, we probably will not bring it up. We might offhandedly mention that something happened, but we're trying to really focus in on the stuff that we think we want to unpack.
Yeah, and it'll just help it be, like, a little bit shorter, but also, like, focus more on the important stuff.
Right. But yeah, so basically we just wanted to clarify that if we skip scenes, it's not because we've lost our minds. It's because we're intentionally trying to focus on the stuff that's important. But to that caveat, if we skip a scene that you really like or that you find really interesting, feel free always to reach out to us and be like, hey, I wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on X scene if we didn't talk about it, and we will happily address it in our next episode that we record. So
I look forward to the, like, Riley, like, brushing her hair stands who are like, I can't believe you didn't mention this. It's so important.
So yes, that we just wanted to put that out there, that's a little change that we're doing. Another little change is that we're adding to our pre-stats here, so we can start with this episode, a discussion of the screen cap that is included for each episode. As most people should know, I think if you look at the episodes on the website or on Instagram, you know, we like to include screen caps for each episode, which is like, you know, if you're on Netflix and you were looking at the episodes, they have an image that kind of is the preview for the episode. We've, since the beginning, have included pictures for those. They have, I will say, become more specific and more interesting as the seasons have gone on, and I've become more dedicated to creating manipped images for this experience. But there's some fun ones. There's some fun ones early on, and I thought it'd be fun for the people who know of those images and appreciate the manips. We can talk as we go on about either what was the process of finding that photo or what was the process of putting the pieces together, how much work went into each one. Some are very easy, some are elaborate. A little kind of behind the scenes magic discussion there.
I mean, should we just, like, quickly go through, like, the previous 4 as well, since we're here and we didn't talk about them? Yeah,
so let's see. The first episode is Farkle, and he's, like, laying on his bed looking dramatic and forlorn. That is just, we wanted a picture of Farkle for the premiere because, you know, as we know, like, yes, Riley is one of our protagonists, but Farkle is the other. So that's kind of our little token to him, and it's him being dramatic and forlorn, which he is dramatic and forlorn. So that's kind of the fit there.
It kind of reminds me of, like, some foreshadowing to a certain, like, dropping off, like, a stage piece. Love that for us. That's very, like, long form foreshadowing there, but I don't think he actually lies on his bed in the episode, does he? But that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we don't... Actually, it's funny, you know, that he is the image. Like, it was intentional that we made him the image, but we don't see much of him in the pilot, really, to be honest. And even now, I mean, we've talked about this in the past episodes, Farkle remains a bit elusive for as big as his personality is. We have not spent too much time with him yet. So
yeah, I feel like we get more of, like, Issa and Maya in the, like, following 4 episodes.
We do. It's true. So then episode 2 is a picture. I mean, people who watch Girl Meets World will know this cap is from the World Meets Girl, like, behind the scenes episode that was before the last couple episodes of this season of the series. And it's the reason we used it is because of the fact that because it is a behind the scenes episode, it looks a little more like, oh, someone could have been taking this on camera. And as we know, episode 2, as much as it doesn't make sense, is a mockumentary episode, so it made sense to, like, have that camera angle be a little bit different. The setting, of course, looks nothing like anything in Adams would be like, so it's kind of like you just gotta, in some cases with these caps, you just gotta go with it, you gotta believe it, you gotta lean into it. The little difference that I made for that one was I added the layer on Photoshop of that, like, camera recording detail of, like, the recording button and all that kind of stuff, so that was a super easy added element to that episode. Episode 3 is for Under Pressure. We had Maya doing some crazy dance bending. She's really showing off that she can bend and stretch and be flexible. She was definitely chosen for that. Well, I'll say, first of all, one of the reasons that there's a lot of Maya caps early on is because Sabrina has so much content. And when we were in season 1, everybody else did not have any content. As someone who has been in the Girl Meets World fandom since about 2017 and has been, you know, doing alternate universes and really enjoys building those worlds, I have spent way too much damn time with this cast, like, looking at their photos, trying to squeeze every single ounce of creativity I can out of the photos that they had. And in that era of, like, 2017 to 2019, like, right after the show ended, it was rough. Like, it was really rough because a lot of them were not doing things. They were taking breaks. They were non-existent. And, like, people should know, like, Peyton, you know, I love, Lucas is my favorite. I love him. Being his stan was so hard because Peyton has no photos. And it was like, I can't make anything. But I did. I used the same, like, 7 photos and made, like, 7 different things out of it.
It used to be, like, every week it was like you were annoyed about Peyton, but now it's always Amir.
Yeah, so that's the thing is, like, Peyton is kind of on the come up a little bit now, and he... American Housewife is a godsend. There's a lot of great photos to pull from there, even though his character is not like Lucas James Farrar at all, and he's kind of an idiot in that show. But a photo's a photo, so if you can just find that 1 second where it looks good, you can pull from that. That's been very helpful. And he, you know, with He's All That and all that kind of stuff, he's coming up a little bit, so he's gotten some photo shoots, and he's gotten some updated headshots, and every time I'm like, yes, I'm so proud of you, like, thank you, on God, for getting some content, like, actually
just
use.
For us.
And it was the same way with Tanner for Charlie. You know, Tanner was kind of completely off the grid for like 3 years, and then he started like 2019 like really laying out some photo shoots, and I was like, okay, word, love it, so happy. And Cobra Kai has been really awful and not useful because I don't know if anybody's seen Cobra Kai. I've only watched the first season. I don't like it. We won't get into that. But his hair in that show is awful. It's so bad. He looks like Coconut Head if you've seen Ned's Declassified.
Which you should have. It's amazing.
Yes, you should have. It's just not usable. Like, I can't really get much out of that show at all. So for him to actually be doing stuff now, like, He's All That, awful movie. Maybe we'll talk about that sometime for fun since both Peyton and Tanner are in it. Terrible movie, but in the second half when he had his makeover, very usable content. So I was like, thank God.
Thank that movie provided something.
Yes, literally. It gave something to the world. It doesn't realize because our world's very small, but we did feast. We did receive in that scenario. But yes, typically the ones who are very difficult to work with, and this is why you'll see less of them in caps, just because there's just not that much to work with. Amir, he must hate me because he's just like, I'm not going to give you anything ever. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Cece, which, he's awesome. Love him. But he also, like, serves nothing. His Insta's very fun, should be clear. Some fun stuff going on there. Definitely. It's not usable. So we cry. Yeah. And then Rowan is, like, kind of here and there because she's kind of, like, she's having her moment. She's being very, like, fashion, going through her, late teens, early 20s, like, she's going through modes, and that's, good for her. Do what she wants. Really not helpful to me. Get it, girl. But it is what it is. I try my best. They're the ones I have to...
Yeah, you wouldn't think that Riley was a protagonist looking at the screen at all.
Yeah, literally.
But that's okay. She did that. And sometimes the screen caps are so random.
Yeah, that's true, too. So they're the ones that are difficult. I will say... Liam and Ricky of Forever in Your Mind and of Dasher, they are interesting because they have a lot of content, but it's a lot. First of all, it's kind of old. They haven't done a lot in the last couple of years, but it's also like a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Like it's like events or Instagram photos, but they're usable. It's just that I have to kind of take those and then put them in things that look like they could be associated with Ambition, but I don't mind.
Or they're like looking at the camera a lot.
Right, because they're like music videoing and that you look at it. Yeah. But I try my best, and they help. They give me stuff. They don't give me nothing, and for that I am grateful. And then Sabrina, of course, is like the top one. She has so much content. Never worried about her. And then Corey's kind of like in the middle. He has some stuff that I'm able to pull from, and I appreciate that. He's had some not great moments where I've been like, well, you have nothing. And then other times I'm like,
yes,
it's not too bad. So, and then we won't even talk about Yindra and Nigel and Jade and all of them because it's just like so hard. So you're like probably never going to see them in screen caps because I can only do so much. So
definitely not. I mean, I feel like maybe Nigel like could give something. Like he does occasionally post on his Instagram.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
But that's it. It's like very limited. It would have to be like such a specific situation that he had also been in.
Yes, I wanted to include him in a season 4 one, but I just could not. I couldn't make it work. But maybe next time. Okay. So, all that to say, coming back to the caps. So yes, season 3, episode 3 and episode 4 are both Sabrina. They're both Maya. And it is for that reason. It's because she had photos in season 1, and I was like, well, I just want to get this done. So, bam, there we go. So we have Holiday, Maya, singing, because she's at the showcase, blah, blah, blah. And then
so cute.
Under Pressure was her being in her dance outfits. Because, I mean, Under Pressure works as well, because that was an episode that did have a big Maya plotline. So it fit very well in that scenario.
Yeah. And then now we come to this week's episode.
Yes. So we can jump back to the stats, and we'll come back to the photo for this as we're discussing the stats after that long-winded tangent. Hopefully it's fun, though.
Hopefully.
So we have our word count is 607. There's 6,000, not 600. Can you imagine a 600 word episode?
That's a paragraph.
Yeah. It's like, okay, there you go. All done. So 6,774 words, which equates to our theoretical runtime of 44 minutes. So the same as 102. It is on page count of a PDF. It's 14 pages. I also added another little piece of info here. I decided I'd start talking about how many songs are in an episode because that varies.
Ooh, I love that.
Wide range. This episode, it only has 7, so not that many. And then the air date.
Although considering it's the shortest episode and it still has 7.
Yeah.
Quite a lot.
and as we'll talk about, the performances take like nothing out of this episode. They take like
one
one paragraph a song. It's really bad, but we'll talk about that. The mystery continues of when did this air? We have no idea. I was doing a little bit of digging. I think the air date here, if I'm starting to try and parse this out, this says May 17th, 2019, which I think could make sense because when we start catching up to actual dates, May 31st was 108. So, and then for the cap for this episode is Charlie, and he is looking at his phone, which is great, partially because, one, let me just say, Tanner, and so this is from this movie that he was in, which is a very silly movie called Max Winslow. We use a lot of caps from this early on just because his hair is so perfect. Like, it looks exactly how season 1 Charlie hair would look. In season 2 as well, a little bit. That looks great. It's great that he's looking at the phone because the Instagram takes up so much of this episode. It's such a big focal point. And it's also great that, I mean, he has the B plot, kind of, in this episode. So it was a great fit. I was like, yay, this works really well. That's one of the first ones that I think was a really good, like, this is really clearly a good fit for this episode.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more specific ones that we have at the start here. Like, because a lot of these first ones are very, like, it's almost just, like, aesthetically, like, yeah, we're, like, in the zone of ambition, but it's not really giving any specifics.
Right. And this is the first one that starts to lean that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's our brief stats. So this title here that we have for this episode is Extra Extra. Yes. This is one of my favorite titles of season 1 because I love that it has a double meaning. I love that it has, because, you know, they used to do extra extra, read all about it, like very news.
Yes.
And that is such a big element of this episode, is that these big news bulletins that were all getting dropped on us.
Yes.
And I love as well.
It makes me think of that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that extra also means it's a theater term, or like if you're an extra in the chorus, if you're an extra in the cast, you know, it has that layer. And then it also has the layer of extra in the sort of
people being over the top.
Right. Exactly. The slang term of extra, which this episode is a little bit extra on the way that people handle situations. So I love the title for that reason, because I think it's leading into that great ambition title thing that we do of having the titles apply to many different things or have many different meanings.
Yeah, I love that. It's very, like, catchy as well. Mm-hmm. We love
nice.
it.
Crisp. We know I love a crisp title, you know, nice and to the point.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah. So I can pull up the synopsis here. This one also has a great double meaning tagline here. The tagline is headliners. And so this has...
Yes, love that.
Right, it has a dual meaning. It has... Headliners are people who are the big stars in a show, you know, like the person on the marquee. It has that meaning, and then also a headline, of course, in a newspaper is the biggest piece of news, the front page thing. So we have that tagline, headliners, and the synopsis is: Isadora's world crumbles when AAA Confessions shares a major secret. Lucas's temper flares out of control. Rumors swirl around Charlie and his relationship with Riley.
Hoo. Interesting.
It is pretty straightforward, all things considered.
It's pretty straightforward. It's specific, but also not giving away anything. Mm-hmm. I think if you were to read this, like, it's hard to know because we obviously know what happens, but if you were to read this the first time, you would definitely be like, what secret could Issa possibly have? Like, it does feel very, like, dramatic.
I would say too, I was a little bit like, it's a little weird to me that Charlie is mentioned and kind of featured here. At the same time, I guess it makes sense because the A plot of this episode, which is those first two kind of statements in the headliners, they're so much of the episode that the B plot, even if it's pretty thin, that's like kind of all there is otherwise. So it's like, well, if we had to bring up something, I guess we'll bring up that. But I do think it's interesting that it's phrased that rumors swirl around Charlie and his relationship with Riley rather than Riley and her relationship with Charlie. It kind of puts the focus on Charlie instead of Riley, and I think that that's an interesting choice.
Well, it's definitely a hint, isn't it? It's definitely like, oh, something's not as it seems.
Right. It's intentional that the subject of the sentence is one and not the other.
Yeah, I think it already points to, like, a little bit of misdirection, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Ooh, it's winking. It's winking at something.
All right, are we ready to dive in? Are we ready to do it?
I'm so ready.
All right, here we go. So we jump right in with a song this episode to kick us off, which, as we know, I've said before, I enjoy when we launch right in with a song. I think it's fun. It puts us right in the moment. And this is a very aesthetic, dramatic opening here. We have Maya and her groupies, so Chai, Sarah, Darby, performing Rumor Has It by Adele.
So good. Very, what were their names? The in Glee.
In Glee,
Girls?
oh, with Mercedes
Yeah.
and what were they called? Oh, the treble tones.
Yes, right, exactly.
Oh, my Glee knowledge, it will never go away. It's buried in there. I just have to pull it out, and here it is. Yes, the treble tones. It does have that vibe, because they did perform that, I believe, in Glee at one point.
It immediately makes me think of that, which is like Glee, you know, brain rot. But
yes.
Yeah.
And it was used to quite dramatic effect in that episode as well. It's just a dramatic song.
It is. It's a good one. It has sort of a punch that it gives.
Yes.
Which it definitely does here. And so I guess what happens is, like, they're in the auditorium, and then we're seeing everything else kind of with that in the background flashing.
Yes.
Back.
So it's kind of a split. It's what comes to be known in Ambition as kind of a montage performance of you have a performance going on, but we're seeing a bunch of other stuff at the same time. We use this a lot as the seasons go on. So I think that this is a really strong sequence opening for the episode. I think it's a really good, like I said, it's very conceptually clear. It's very aesthetically clear. It gives us the feeling of the episode right off the bat. And I think that those four and their vocals, especially Maya at the front, would be killing. They would be delivering. It would be quite strong. But yes, we're very much immediately out of the high that we were on at the end of last episode with everything being cute, and this is like we're cutting right into it. Like there's no transition,
kind of
there's no ease back into it.
It's like it has this sort of weight, this sort of almost noir vibe. It's like, okay guys, it's about to get a bit dramatic.
Yes, and I think it's interesting too that it mentions, like we're back from winter break and that's gone. And I think it's interesting in the sense that winter break is over so early this season. Like 4 episodes, we're in the second semester, whereas typically during the school year, it's like half a season is half the school year, It's like the semester ends when the midpoint ends, approximately. It wavers a little bit in season 2, but season 3 is literally like first 8 episodes, first semester, second 8 episodes, second semester. So this is like, no, first semesters, we don't care about that.
I mean, that's fine. And I guess, so when Riley starts at the school, is it the start of the year?
Yes. Yeah. It's like the first day, week.
Right. And I guess the first bit is like nothing's really happening the first few episodes because it's just sort of Riley is settling in and everything's kind of normal and she hasn't decided, like she's there, but she hasn't decided to kind of shake things up a little bit.
To meddle.
Yeah. So there wouldn't really be much to report on. It's almost like the first few episodes, it's like how it takes the first few to kind of get into it. They are actually just setting up like the background in a way. And then
and you can imagine too, if I had cut 102, then it'd be the 4th episode. We're no longer in first semester. So clearly first semester sophomore year, it's whatever.
It's just like nothing really happened. People just did stuff, were crazy. Yeah. Sort of posted on the confessions page, but nothing too insane yet.
Yes, we have the performance, and then this other element here is that we are kind of doing the thing we did in the premiere of visiting people as they're getting ready for the school day, except we really don't. We like say like, oh, we visit everyone, but we don't. We really focus on like 2 people and what's going on with them because they're the important factor here.
I suppose like in theory, we may, like you didn't go into detail back in these days, and there's a chance that it may be flashed onto like everyone kind of like leaving their house really quickly or like that kind of thing, but it's just like nothing really happened, so you're like, okay, but this is what's important.
Right. I mean, this episode, I will say, it is not as iresome to me as 102 is, because I think that there's a lot of really good plot things in this episode, and it's a very important episode, and has a lot of, we will talk so much about like so many interesting things to explore in the layers here. That being said, the writing is still it's not as bad as 102. I think there's some really good writing moments in here, but generally just me not digging into things very much. Like, it's very frustrating to present day me. I'm like, what were you doing? But it's literally because, again, at this time I was just like, la 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 la, post.
I know. So. It was very casual. It was very relaxed. It was just like, here's something I whipped up
in 2 days.
Like, little, you know, now it's like a whole meal. It's like, there's spices, there's, you know, there's simmering, there's like all these little, like, we're blanching some spinach, whatever.
Delicious.
No, so, but yeah. I definitely think, like, it's cool to start, like, again, it's almost like how I said there's the sort of lead up of the previous few episodes being quite background fitting, and then this is starting with that people getting ready, and it's kind of showing like a little bit of like a progression, but also I think the amount of times that you go back to like showing like a montage of people in their homes throughout the series is very indicative of like people's home lives, that like whether they bring it to school or whether they don't, and how that affects them. It's very interesting, and I think that's like definitely a big theme overall, is like where the home is like,
yes, absolutely, yeah, good. I mean, that you're right, you're hitting on such a big major theme that we do, because S and I are both very much character driven writers, and to us it's like your home, you know, or lack thereof, and your family or lack thereof, you cannot escape that influence. It impacts you in such a way, whether that's a positive or a negative influence. And I think we see that in all of the characters in all of their different ways, and we really kind of explore that. So I think you're right that visiting everybody in these moments, because you're right, this happens throughout the series, it's kind of speaking to that. It's like where they are in that moment, who they're with, what point they're at in their life. That's all, you can get that from, you know, 3 seconds of Charlie sitting on his balcony alone, or Issa in the crowded foster home. You know, like, you just, it says a lot by not saying a lot.
Exactly.
So yes, in this moment, in this montage of 105, one thing I wanted to talk about is there's one person who's very much the focus of this little montage. The other person who kind of gets a secondary nod is Riley. And her moment is that Corey and Topanga are arguing so much that it is becoming difficult to ignore. And Riley is at the point where to avoid walking in the middle of their arguing, she's climbing out her window to go to school. Dang. Rather than walking through the apartment to go out the front door.
That's rough.
It is rough. And I will say though, a bit of a parallelism to a certain grumpy booth boy who often escapes his home by climbing down his fire escape rather than the door.
Okay, we love a parallel. They are more similar than they know already at this point. Yeah, it's beautiful. Other than the fact that they like don't feel comfortable at home. That's not that great, but you know, they have each other.
Right, you know. Yeah, so then our other main focus here, though, the real star of this little opening montage is Isadora. And when she's getting ready for the day, she gets a text message from Asher, which I kind of assume, it doesn't say this, but I assume this might be in the techie group chat, or at least one of them is, because both Dylan and Asher text her. I'm assuming it's, I don't know why I feel like one of them would be in the group chat, but I'm sure if we see them talking about it later, so if they all know, it was kind of like, somebody message her. So we get this first text from Asher that says, did you see the confessions page? And if I got that text from one of my friends, I'd be like so terrified. I'd be like, what the fuck? Like, why are you telling me this? That cannot be good. Especially because then it gets followed up with Dylan texting, who it notes here is noted as Dill Pickle in all of their phones. I'm glad that was established very early on.
Yes, so important.
And his text is, OMG, why didn't you tell us? So that's another, like, oh my god, what is happening? I'm scared. I would be...
terrifying.
Yeah, I would be totally like, I don't want to look. I don't want to know. But Issa does look, so then Issa does know. And Issa, it says here, scrolls past a post of Riley and Charlie, so clearly that's going to come back later. But what she sees, that's not Riley and Charlie, is so horrifying to her that she drops her phone in mortification.
I mean, it's just not a good day for Issa. Like,
not starting strong. No,
they already not living the best time, and yet it just gets worse.
Yep. And here, what we learned very quickly what this post is, which is that we are seeing a photo of Issa and a rather glamorous woman who we learn is Valerie De La Cruz, and she is one of the biggest pop stars out there right now. And this post kind of reveals, in a sense, that Issa is Valerie's illegitimate bastard daughter. Like, oh,
OMG.
Whoa. I will say a couple things about this. One, I will admit, whenever we get S on here and do an episode with her, we'll have to ask her about this, because I cannot for the life of me remember where this plot came from. I know it was S's idea, but I don't remember how early on we talked about it. I don't remember why we decided to kind of wait on it. Like, I cannot even tell you, like, how this came to be. It becomes such an important part of the first two seasons, and I love it, and it's such a fun storyline. Could not tell you where it came from. So, I mean, honestly, S will have to address
all
that.
The seasons so far, like, the first 3 seasons, because, like, dealing with the grief and stuff, and then, like, I don't know what's going to happen with, like, the paternity type situation of Issa, but, like,
right,
that is a kind of ongoing thing that has to do with Valerie.
Yeah, I mean, it's arguably Issa's biggest arc, biggest storyline.
Yeah,
is this continuing, again, family. What is my family? Who was my family? Where do I fit with them?
Wow.
So, yes, we'll have S on here, and we'll dig into that at some point.
Cool.
But, you know, I love this plot. I have to admit, I'm like, logistically, how was this kept a secret? I really don't know. If Val is the one that says, you know, posted this photo because they were together during winter break. And we know Val has had some up and downs about, like, being clear that Issa exists and doesn't exist, and that's fair. But I'm like, how did no one at this school know already except Lucas and Sean and Eric? Like, I guess Jack probably knows as well, but it's like, I'm a little like, that's a little bit stretching the believability, but oh well.
we're gonna move past it. I think, you know, there's a chance that she posted it on, like, not her main Insta. I mean, you know, we can reason it out, but we won't. That's fine.
Or it could be, you know, that you bring up, it could be if it was posted on, like, I mean, this is not, it doesn't say so in this, so now we're extrapolating, but that's okay. If it was posted on, like, a fan account of Valerie, and they had found it from, like, a leaked photo, or, you know, a fan account on the internet, or Facebook, or something like that, because that is the crazy thing. You know, we were talking about looking for photos of this cast for these manips, like, some people be having some random photos, and you're like, where did you get this photo that is not anywhere else on the internet, but you have it?
It's like they are friends with, like, their family or something.
Right.
And they're, like, on their Facebook. I don't know.
Exactly. No, literally. I mean, that could very well be the thread here. An example of this from some Maggie lore is there's a photo. We've used it, I think, somewhere. It exists. There's this photo that Liam and Ricky took in a photo shoot that is, like, it's so Dasher. It's, like, Liam, like, carrying Ricky on his shoulders. And it's so cute, like, so fun, but it does not exist on the internet. Like, the reason we found this photo is because some Forever in Your Minder edit person on Instagram included it in an edit of Ricky and Liam, and so it's like this not great quality image, but I'm like, where did they get the photo? Because it is not on the internet. Like, I have looked and looked and looked for this photo, and I've never found it. So that's a great example of that exact thing. Like, maybe someone just, exactly, just had access to it, and they floated it this way, and it went through this channel, and it ended up on AAC.
Yep.
But, man, if anybody knows where to find that photo, if you know what I'm talking about, hit me up.
This is a message to the world.
Yeah, so that was this kind of, is it believable that it was a secret? Maybe not, but it's okay. We're going to go with it for the drama. The other thing I just wanted to mention in terms of this opening stuff is we talk a little bit later, I think, about this, but this photo that was taken of Riley and Charlie, that is the focus of this other post, which I believe it says at some point is their hug at the end of the winter showcase performance that they did. Again, I asked the question, who took that photo? Because we don't have to ask who submitted it, because we know. But in terms of who took it, I was like, how would that photo have come to exist?
I know. I feel like I know this. Okay, here's what happened. It was one of Riley's sisters. No, not Riley's. Charlie's sisters. It was one of Charlie's sisters. or parents, I guess, and they were taking a lot of photos at the showcase, being like, I'm taking photos of Charlie. They captured that one. They sent them all in like a nice like OneDrive file, and Charlie like looked through, had a cheeky download, sent it off.
No, yeah, I mean, I think I was kind of similarly thinking the same thing. My note was probably if it was one of the family members, it would be Eleanor.
Yeah, maybe.
Because she would be the one taking, Rosie would be like, I don't give a shit about this. But like in Catholic version, I don't give a shit about this. Like I'm just here watching my brother perform his stupid song. Especially because she's very, season 1, season 2, she's very in her like grumpy tween mode. So she's like, I don't want to be here. Just like Yuri. But so I don't think it was a sister, but it could, unless Agatha's there, but she was not mentioned. So I doubt she was there.
Yeah, because I'm thinking if it was any of them, it would have been Agatha. Or it would have been, what's his name that she's married to?
John Duffy.
John. Like, I feel like John would be the type to, like, take photos all the time, you know?
Yeah,
like, he'd be like,
true,
I've
totally.
made this other OneDrive folder for you guys of all the photos from the, like,
absolutely
dinner we had.
Yeah, no, totally. I love that. But yeah, so I was thinking either Eleanor, or my other thought was it could have been Haley or Clarissa. Because they're friends with Charlie, they'd be taking photos. Either way, they definitely were like, look at the photos I took, and Charlie's like, oh, cute. Let me just take that one real quick. Don't look at me.
The thing is, if it was Haley or Clarissa, they would know that one of those 3 people submitted it.
Oh, that's interesting too. It's like we're getting to a clue here. Like, ooh, this person knows this, but this person didn't know this. That is interesting. So maybe that's a good point that it maybe wouldn't be one of them, or maybe if it was one of them, if it was one of them, and then Clarissa saw that got posted, maybe and Haley's really upset about it. Clarissa's like,
interesting.
Definitely wasn't Haley. Definitely wasn't me. And that's the moment she's like, Charlie's gay.
Yeah, she's like, I have connected the dots.
I cracked it right now. Don't need any more information. I've solved it. So
she just sits there in silence for the rest of the week. She's just like, interesting.
For the rest of the year, for the rest of the next 3 years, she's just like, well, I figured it out right then, and then I just had to sit on that. So, oh my goodness. So that's our prevailing theories. It was either a Gardner or Gardner adjacent, or it was Clarissa, and that's how she found out he was gay, and then she sat on it for 2 years.
And if it was Clarissa, and then Charlie still sent it, knowing that Clarissa would see, like, that's so dumb. So stupid.
But that's believable because it comes back to that thing of like, Charlie is so not strategic. He's such an idiot when it comes to being like schemy. Like he's like, oh great, look at this photo. Not even thinking, wait, Clarissa can look at the Instagram. Oh my god, that's so funny. Charlie's like, I'm so good at this. No one knows I'm gay. I'm keeping such a good secret. My tracks are clear. He's got tracks all over the room. Like, his handprints are all over everything. This guy.
I love that. I want it to be that now. I've decided.
Okay. Bangs gavel, we've decided. That's so good. So, yeah, now that we've enjoyed some humor, we have to step out of the humor.
Somber.
And we come to school. Everybody's looking at this photo. Everybody's discussing, oh my god, like, Issa, daughter of Valerie De La Cruz, how could that be? Like, she's not even talented, like, saying some mean stuff. And Issa has to go to school and, like, face all this, and she tries her best, doesn't get very far, kind of ducks into a bathroom to hide. It becomes too much, panic attack pressure coming on, and she throws her phone against the wall, it shatters, and that is the end of the performance and the end of the opening sequence, and we go into cue title sequence.
Yeah, luckily her mum is a billionaire because she can just afford to throw her phone across it.
Just gotta buy a new iPhone, yeah.
Or
Android, perhaps.
Hey, Mom, if you want me to contact you, you need to buy me a new phone. TYS.
Hey, Mom, it's your fault I broke my other phone, so give me a new one.
Pay up. Okay, so we're in it now. The drama is happening. Very important techie scene now. Very telling, especially Dave. That man has wisdom beyond his years.
Yes. They're talking about these posts. Lucas comes down from the booth, And they're like, oh, Lucas, did you know? And he's like, this, shut up, it's too early for this, what are you talking about? And Dave is the one who takes the lead on this, because we learn very quickly, like, Jeff says, you're way too obsessed with this damn Instagram. Dave is obsessed with it, which I will say, you know what, glow up for Dave that he was so obsessed with this gossip mongering website, and then by season 3 he is the most trusted news anchor at AAA with, you know, Doji News. So good for him. That's a glow up. He loves to find the truth. What a guy. But so they're obviously all talking about the Issa post, because obviously that's what the techies would care about. When Dave explains it, he does not start with that post.
He does not.
He starts with, so there was this really interesting bulletin that Prince Charming Charlie Gardner may have finally found his chosen princess and one Miss Riley Matthews. And Lucas is like, why the fuck do I care about that?
He's like, and what?
and everyone else is like, what? Why was that your answer?
And then Dave is like, I'm connecting the dots. Like, he is, like, putting it together. And he's the only one. This is why he becomes the best news anchor. Because he's an investigative journalist at this point. Like,
investigative,
yeah. He's, like, pulling all the threads.
He is an investigator. Absolutely.
And no one else is noticing.
That's very interesting to me, because I had a very similar note, which is, like, him being like, there's this post. First of all, Lucas, you care about that? Second of all, it's interesting because the last narrative on this thing was that it was, you know, suggesting a very different narrative, which is implying the post in 103 about Charlie and Zay. And I think it's very interesting that Dave remembers that and has interest in that, because as we know in later seasons, like in season 3, when we get to the midpoint, when we get to Moment of Truth, he has this whole monologue with Yogi where he's talking about the situation that they're in. And he has a whole tangent about, like, this started with Charlie. And it's because Charlie and Zay weren't friends anymore. And and he was, like, so in it. Like, he had every single understanding of that dynamic falling apart, causing everything else. I'm like, he is a ZC stan.
Yeah, he's on another level of, like, noticing things, and it's like he can't get his words across, and he, like, gets distracted by things, but he knows what's going on. He can see it.
He doesn't know what he perceives, but he perceives.
He perceives.
Kind of amazing, kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
So we get this bulletin from him, still not talking about Issa. Lucas has this hilarious moment where he's like, oh, hey, can I have your phone? And Dave's like, yeah, here you go. And he deletes the Instagram app.
Amazing.
To which Dave is like, hey, frowny face. But then they actually explain what's going on. They're like, okay, this thing got posted about Issa. And Lucas aptly is like, shit, that's not good. And he immediately rushes off to go find Issa. Who should he run into while he's rushing off to find Issa? But Riley, who is also assuming this is not a good situation because this is the first time a techie has been posted on the page. Clearly, she assumed that was not going to go over well. So she runs into Lucas. She's like, have you seen Issa? He doesn't even let her finish. He's like, let's go. Let's go find her. We're on it. So we have this great kind of tag team moment of Riley and Lucas, like, scouring the halls and scouring the bathrooms to try and find Issa.
Yeah, and I love, like, it's almost like Issa is such a magnet for these two at the moment. You know, she takes him tree shopping, lets Riley sit next to her, and without Issa, who knows what would happen.
No, that's so true. I mean, I think that's something that kind of exists in a lot of dynamics in Ambition, is that kind of, like, who's that middle person who allowed these people to come together. Not all of the dynamics are like that, but many of them are. And I think,
like Lucas for Dasha, definitely.
Yes. And I think that is a great point, is that Riley and Lucas were kind of brought together through Issa. So maybe they owe Issa a little bit. Yes, so they are looking for Issa. They find her in the girls' bathroom that she's in. It's kind of funny that as they've been looking, like, Riley will jump into the girls' restroom first to look, and if there's no report, they move on. In this moment, when they can hear Issa, Lucas does not wait for Riley. Lucas says, I'm going in, and just rushes into the girls' bathroom. And I think he has such an interesting, bizarre conception of, like, being self-conscious or, like, being, you know, shameful about things, because as we know later, like, he can be quite embarrassed and quite bashful about certain things, but he walks into the girls' restroom without a care. He walks into the girls' dressing room without a care. Like, if he's not in his own head about it, he's like, I really don't care. It's only when it's like he's thinking about it that it's suddenly like, oh, I feel weird about this.
Yes. I feel like it's almost that like little homeless boy feral cat mind, like that kind of social structure doesn't exist to him because he doesn't live in that like imagined order of the society. He lives like separate to that as like an outcast at this point, and you know, because his home life is so messed up, he just doesn't have the same, you know, set of rules necessarily that so often rule everyone else.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And there's more to discuss about the way Lucas has been formed, in a sense, in this episode. But yeah, so they find Issa. Issa's having a panic attack, completely understandably. And Lucas just jumps right into it. Like, he knows exactly what to do. He gets down on the level. He's like, hey, it's me. Like, let's talk through this. Let's go through the things that we know to do. And Riley is like, wow. Like, okay, like, he clearly knows what's up. It shows a different side of him that she has not seen at all before. And what I really love about this scene, aside from, like, how great it is, like, friendship, you know, Lucas and Isadora, what I love about it is that it's so demonstrative for Lucas of how he is with his loved ones. Like, we've really only seen him at this point from an almost exterior perspective of, like, this is his persona. This is how he is around people who don't like him. This is how he is when he's on defensive. This is how he is when he's being a jackass. Like, that's all we've been able to see so far. And this moment just completely rips that away, because this is like, he cares so much. And when he cares, you see it. Like, he cannot, if it's someone he really loves, all that goes out the window. Like, it doesn't matter. And I think that that's so apparent here.
He's like, because, you know, we always say he's like a feral cat, but apparently, like, the tortoise cats, you know, the kind of, like, patchy brown kind of ones. Torties, exactly. They, like, are very, like, they latch onto one person a lot more, and that is Lucas. Like, he is, like, he's kind of, this is my person. I'm, like, protect at all cost. Everyone else, like, go to hell. I will be loyal. I will be supportive to Isadora.
Right. Especially at this moment, at this point, right now.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just love it. Like, I completely understand why Riley's kind of like, oh, my heart is swelling. Like,
okay. It's kind of like a little bit of the weird juxtaposition, because Lucas and Issa having this really serious thing, and Riley's obviously worried, but she's also kind of like, oh, okay.
Right. She's like, okay, I'm seeing. There's that meme that's like, it's like this set of memes. I don't really understand where these things come from, but it's like the emoji with like the huge eyes, and they have hearts in the eyes, and it's like, I'm looking directly at you. Like, that is Riley to Lucas right now. Like, I am looking directly at you, being so sweet with your friend.
It kind of also reminds me in a completely random way of, because I just watched Lemonade Mouth again the other day, and I don't know if you remember, but there's one scene where one of the girls is having a panic attack in the bathroom, and they all go and, like, visit her, and it's just so funny because it's Halloween and someone comes in dressed as a toilet, and the guys are, like, sort of awkwardly like, okay, we're going in, even though it's the girls' bathroom. Yeah. And then one of them sort of hovers by the door, and he sees this girl coming in as a toilet, and he's like, no, thank you, we have enough. Like, we're good for those, but you maybe try next door. It's like the most...
What a great connection.
I love that.
So good. So yes, Lucas is there, he helps. We get out of this moment. We're gonna survive for now. We made it out of the worst. Back in the auditorium, the class is discussing all of these dramatic bulletins. There's this, one of my favorite exchanges in this episode is between Darby and Haley, where they're like, how could we not know that someone so major is, like, we're the child of one of those people? And Darby says, my mom's part of the team developing a cure for lung cancer in pets. And Haley goes, okay, Darbs, we met someone famous that we care about. And I was like, oh, I love the A class. Like, that's just such a fun, silly exchange. It's so good.
I think what this scene proves, almost more than anything, and this episode entirely, is just that these are just dumb 14-year-olds. Like, the reason they haven't known is because they're idiots. Like, they just never thought to be like, Smackles? I don't think that's her real last name. I'm actually just going to read the yearbook and actually, like, use my brain.
Yeah, like Nate says, you know, like, yeah, you could have checked the yearbook. And Dave's like, since when? But no, I mean, I think that's true. And to be fair to them, while I'm like, generally, I don't believe that it could be a secret that much. I'm like, if I, you know, in high school, I was not thinking that deeply about my classmates, even my direct classmates. It's not like I was curious enough to go be like, let me look up their parents. So I think it is a fair thing that, like, if you're 15, you're self-absorbed, you're not thinking that deeply, you're in your moment of whatever's dramatic in that moment. So I do think it's permissible that at the school, they don't know this, because if they're just not focused on themselves, like, you know, Farkle would never figure this out on his own because he doesn't care about Issa. He cares about himself. So
exactly.
It's like
and
that
Issa
kind of thing.
Stays in the background on purpose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They wrote Issa off immediately and they never bothered to check.
Right. And I mean, this thing of the nickname of Smackle, which very quickly disappears after this episode. The kind of backstory to that, obviously, is that we were pulling from Girl Meets World, and where that was her actual last name, but we didn't want to use that here for story purposes and just for, like, believable last name purposes. So the kind of origin story that we came up with for why does this exist in this world is the nickname early on existed because in freshman year, when the techie tots were kind of being silly, and Issa was, like, trying to get them to pay attention, was like, could you listen to me? Could you get it together? You know, being girl boss Issa. They were picking on her, being like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, what are you gonna do? And at one point, like, Nate or Dave or one of them was like, what, you gonna give me a little smackle? Like, you gonna get me to work by, like, doing that? And that was kind of their, like, it was so stupid that came up that they were all, like, laughing about it, and it became this, like, inside joke. And that's where Smackle came from. And that's why they used it so much that the performers just assumed that was her last name. No one was paying attention otherwise. But it really just disappears after this, so it's, like, not even that important. But that's the origin story.
That is very 13-year-old boys of them.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, too, to be like, you know, like, when you're, I mean, this happens in all points of your life, but, like, when you're young and, like, someone says something so stupid and then you just can't stop laughing about it, like, it becomes, like, one of those words that's just like, why is this so funny to me? But one person says it and it's just everybody starts laughing. I think that was that for a long time, for maybe the whole first semester. Like, someone would say Smackle and all of the techie boys would be like,
yeah. And that is just, it does take me back to, like, year 9. Everyone, people got called a lot by their last name, but also, like, nickname version of their last names, to the point that you really did have to know, like, the joke in some of them.
Right. Yeah. So, Charlie kind of jumps in. Of course he does. And he's like, you know, we should stop talking about it because it's clearly, which is, like, very sweet of him to be like, you guys, let's just not talk about it anymore.
Is it sweet, or is he, like, reverse psychology?
Maybe it's a little too, I think you're giving him a little too much credit because he's not smart like that. But I think that he probably is some of this empathy where we know he's a very empathetic character. He's a very empathetic person. But I think part of it is as well, he knows if he was in this situation where his huge secret was leaked out and everybody was talking about it, he would, like, want to die. So I think he's very much like, let's just leave it alone. Guys, let's move on. True.
He's so sweet. What a cutie.
But then everybody else is like, wah, wah, wah. Like, Charlie being so nice. Like, Prince Charming, shut the fuck up. And Nigel has this moment. Nigel is serving some sass this season.
Nigel came through so quick.
He goes, you were featured this morning too, Your Highness. Don't you care about that? Which it's like, wow, Your Highness? Damn.
Like, they really put him on a pedestal that he did not ask to be put on.
I know. He's like, damn, you're cute, and they just really knock you down for that. It's crimes of being cute. Wow. But then Charlie has this line in response that I think is I highlighted it with my irony red. So ironic. He very calmly is like, well, you can't control rumors. And the irony of that is he's working so hard to control rumors about himself. Yeah. So I think it's just such a deliciously ironic line.
It is, and it's like his whole kind of arc for the first 2, even 3 seasons, if you kind of go through the whole, like, vandalism thing, like, you you can't, but also, like, can you? And it's, that's very foreshadowy for Charlie.
Yes. And just kind of, I think, ironic in the sense of like, right, exactly that he acts like he's so calm about this. Like, I'm not bothered, but he, for 3 seasons, is so bothered by what other people think about him.
Yeah.
And that's such a huge piece of his arc, is coming into his own and not caring about that. And it takes him a long time to get there. But here he's acting as if he's already there.
Yeah, this, good acting practice there, Charlie.
Such a good actor. No wonder you're in art school. So, yes. Then Angela shows up. She kind of gets them back on track. She's like, yep, we got stuff to do. So, time to move on.
They're in Eric's office.
Yeah, I love here how, like, they're like, okay, well, Eric's gonna take care of her. Like, it's all good. Like, you guys can go back to class. And Lucas is like, rawr, I don't want to go back to class. Let me stay with my friend. And Jack's like, get the fuck out. Like, we're leaving. Come on.
No, he's like, you're done. You're done.
God, I love them. But then, yeah, we have this moment out here in the hallway where Jack talks to the two of them, and he's like, what do you know of... This is kind of the first time that the adults are tuning into this page. And they're like, hey, what is this thing? What do you guys know about it? The unfortunate thing is that he asked the two people who know absolutely nothing about the page, because Lucas doesn't have social media and, like, doesn't give a shit. And Riley is new and is like, I have no idea. I'm trying to figure it out, buddy. You think I know? Yeah. So Jack really just did not start his investigation very well. He has a lot of trouble investigating, period, this season. Yeah. But it's an interesting moment that it's the three of them, having that kind of come together huddle moment. And then Jack's like, okay, well, get back to class. And Lucas is like, the fuck if I'm gonna go back to class. So he marches off, and Riley has this moment of, okay, well, that's not good. Do I go to class, or do I follow him and make sure he doesn't, like, explode? And she chooses the latter, which is very interesting. That as they're going away, we bleed into the drum opening of the song that we go into next, which is The Nicest Kids in Town from Hairspray.
Woo, love Hairspray. You know this. It is one of the musicals that I will voluntarily listen to in my spare time.
It's a bop. It's really good. This is where I first addressed the fact that, full disclosure, I did a major disservice to performances in this episode. They get, like, nothing.
This is genuinely... Is that just... It's just one paragraph? It's just one... It's not even a paragraph. It's, like, a sentence, basically.
It's, like, 2 sentences, like 3 sentences. It's rough. And there's one that, like, I really get upset about the fact that I wrote nothing about, but we'll come back to that.
We'll get to that.
This one, admittedly, I also really wish I'd written more, because of the fact that this song, I think, is so interesting in the context of the A class.
Yeah.
Like, it does have this great narrative irony of, like, they're like, well, nicest kids in town. But, like, as we know, everybody's being a bitch right now. And this whole situation exists because they're being bitches on this Instagram. So they're clearly not the nicest kids in town. But I also wish that I had written more about it, just because the way that Hairspray with these, with the Corny Collins show, like, has these very, like, caricature-y teen kids. Like, I think it'd be really fun to see, like, we have Farkle as Corny Collins, we have Charlie as Link, but, like, them doing the name rundown that they do in the song, and, like, who's who. And I wrote, too, I think that this song would had to have had the B class. Like, it would have had to have been all of them, because there's too many students in the Corny Collins song for it to just be the A class. Like, they need more people. So I think it would have been just so interesting. And I think it depends as well if they were just rehearsing it versus, like, if they were really going full into it. Because imagine, like, if they're really rehearsing it as if they're going to perform it for something, like, the costumes would be really fun.
Fun.
Who knows how much Jade broke her fingers for that.
Yeah. The petticoats alone.
Yes, the dancing. Like, I really wish I'd written more, because I think this performance becomes underrated, but it's my fault that it's underrated because I didn't write anything about it. So it's like you forget it even happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, at this point, you do sort of realize, oh, yeah, like, our favorite performances from season 1 are the ones that you just actually wrote stuff about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, really. I mean, that's... Ooh, child. I really... God damn it, Maggie. Okay, so... everybody listen to Hairspray. That's the disclaimer there. Moving on, we have this wonderful scene with Riley and Lucas. Lucas goes into the lunch courtyard, which, again, we really have not seen too much of the lunch courtyard at this point because it's winter, but this is a setting that becomes quite common in the next couple seasons. This is kind of our first real scene in it. And it has this great, I think the aesthetic of this scene is so sharp to me. Like, it's, you know, it's the light snow, it's the cold, you know, the steam from your breath. It's like, I can just see it so well. And so Lucas is out there, he's like, God fucking damn it, this sucks. And he is upset, and Riley kind of has this moment of like hesitating, like, should I just leave him alone? Like, should I go try to talk to him? Like, I don't know. But she ultimately chooses to give him the benefit of the doubt and like try to talk to him.
Yay.
And big moment, yeah. So she kind of approaches. Lucas is, you know, out here like kicking tables. But I wanted to, this is the first piece of something that I wanted to kind of explore here, which is, so Lucas kicking the table here, and that being his expression of his anger. In season 1, Lucas, interestingly, I think we know he struggles with anger, but I think season 1 is where it's the most volatile. And I think that part of that is just maturity. You know, as you get older, you mature out of the not being able to handle all your emotions, and it becomes less volatile. But I think a big piece of it as well here, him, you know, kicking the table and destroying something else, taking it out on something else. I think you learn and inherit ways to deal with emotions. You learn that from your environment. You learn that from your parents.
Yeah.
And so I think his instinct to be, even if he doesn't want to be his dad and doesn't like his dad, I think, you know, before domestic violence becomes violence, oftentimes it's destruction of property. It's destruction of things. It's, I'm mad, so I'm going to kick the furniture. I'm mad, so I'm going to punch the wall. Like, I think he inherited all of that so young that when he is upset like this, even if he's not really like necessarily anger, we get anger later, but just not being so overwhelmed and not knowing how to deal with that, like the only thing he knows how to do, that he's been taught to do, is to take it out on something. And so that's why he has this thing of like just kicking at the table, because at least the table's inanimate, you know, like it's okay, it can take it, but he just doesn't. That's what he was taught. That's what he's been inheriting his whole entire life.
And honestly, I mean, it does make sense for like him at a younger age, like to not almost have processed as well that it is something he's kind of inherited and taken on, and that he's got this sort of hate for that part of himself, but he hasn't quite realized that yet, that to the point of being like, I'm not like that, like shutting down.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. So I have more to say on that later that we'll come to, but I mean, it's really just tip of the iceberg, you know, like there's so much going on under there. All that being said, Riley is not deterred. She's like, okay, well, I'm gonna talk to him. I'm gonna talk through this. So she asks, you know, like, what's, you know, don't worry, like, Issa's with my uncle. He's great. Like, she'll be okay. What exactly is the big deal here? You know, like, what's going on? And I love this moment of her being like, so who's Valerie? Like, her kind of being like, who's this bitch? Is like kind of a serve. Like, I love her being so like, I don't know who that is. And it's like partially the consistency of her cluelessness, but I feel like it's also just like a drag. Like, it's like everyone thinks she's so popular, but I don't know her.
Yeah, she's like, why is this even a big deal? Like, this lady can't be that good. I don't know who she is. Yeah. And Lucas is I concur.
Exactly. He's like, good, don't know her. I also think it's a little bit like, I was in my notes, I'm like, that's a mood, because half the time people will be talking about someone, a celebrity, and I'm like, I don't even know who that is. So
yeah, everyone gets in their bubbles. It's like, obviously there are some names that really are household names, but most, it's like, I think the other day I was telling my flatmate, I was like talking about Tanner, and I was like, I don't know, I didn't assume that he would know who Tanner is, but I said Tanner Buchanan, and then he was like, I think I just need to Google who that is, because I don't know who that is. And I was like, yeah, why would you know who that is?
No, yeah, that's completely true. Yeah, I feel like, and Valerie is this kind of interesting thing where she's definitely she's an international pop star, but I think it is that question of like, what level is she at? Like, is she a Taylor, or is she a Britney? You know, like, what level does she hit? And we don't, you know, it's never really exactly said, especially because we're looking at this through the lens of teens at an art school who are going to be so much more into the pop culture scene. versus like if you asked, you know, Grace Fryer, do you know who Valerie De La Cruz is? Like, maybe not, you know? Like, it's just a different... If you asked Randall Orlando, do you know who Valerie De La Cruz is? It's just a different... It's your audience, you know?
Mm-hmm. I almost feel like it's a kind of mid-layer, like not Taylor, Ariana, like Britney, Rihanna kind of vibe. It's more like a... You know,
right, or maybe, people... I mean, you know, she mentioned her contemporaries later. You know, she's like J-Lo, Mariah Carey, like, and those are people that if you are into music, you know them. But there's probably definitely people out there that are like, who, Mariah Carey? That doesn't bring anything to mind. So, so they have this conversation about that. Then it kind of calms down a little bit. They've been in the fresh air. They've had the moment to breathe. And they have this exchange where Lucas says, you know, hey, I'm sorry you're missing class. Like, I didn't mean to turn you into a truant. And Riley has this line that I love. She says, don't flatter yourself. I'm a big girl. I can make my own decisions about being a truant. Rather than like, you know, rather than being like, I'm not a truant. Yeah. She's like, I get to decide if I'm a truant. And I like that because I think it really speaks to the personality that we know, that we get to know by the time we're in season 3. Like, that's a very season 3 Riley line. Yeah. Like, it's there. It's under the surface. It's just she's trying to come into that, you know?
Yes, and I love that Lucas is the person that she kind of is letting that out in front of to begin with. Like, that shows something real, and it's, you know, she's obviously trying to be, like, comforting and a little bit funny and a little bit, like, on his level so that he's, you know, chill in this moment. But I think there's something about him that lets her kind of be like, yeah, well, I can make my own decisions, and this guy clearly supports that because he did the whole unassuming chorus member type situation thing, and also the fact that Lucas probably was like, oh, like subconsciously he was probably like, cool, and that's cool, and then he's like, wait, what brain, no, what is
right, especially because, you know, then Riley says, you know, she's like, well, I get to make my own decision about being a truant, and then she looks at him. She says, you know, so far, it's not so bad sitting there with him. And they have a moment of eye contact. And then Lucas gets uncomfortable and looks away. But, like, just that early beginning, like, I see you, you see me.
That's a moment right there. That is a underrated RL, like, aesthetic moment.
Yes. RL in the snow, you know?
Yeah, it really is
Can't
something.
Beat it. Mm-hmm. Then there's this scene between Angela and Sean. I don't have anything to say about it, but they're like, Sean's like, I knew, but I didn't say anything because I'm loyal to my kids. And it's like, well, that's really nice. You're still a bad teacher, but I respect that.
Yeah, it's like, okay, Sean, good for you. You have a little bit of backbone. We like that. Cool.
Right, like Sean he's kind of personable if he decides that he cares about the person, but he's like, as a teacher, still an awful teacher. Terrible. So then we have Eric and Issa, and, you know, Issa's clearly been upset, but Eric's kind of calming her down, and there's this line here when they're talking about, like, how are we going to handle this, that I think I highlighted in my thematic purple, where it says, if there's anything to know about Isadora, it's that she hates change. And that will be consistent and huge throughout the show.
Yeah. Also, this scene with Eric and Issa is, like, you know, such a big thing because their relationship does become so important, and it's like right from the start, Eric is there and he gets it and he's so comforting.
Yes. They have quite a few moments in this episode, and I think it is very prescient as to what might come. So yeah, it's very nice. Then there's very, very awkward, awful, wonderfully awful Riley and Charlie scene where, you know, people are heading to lunch, we're on our way, and Riley catches up to Charlie, and Charlie's like, hey, like, there's a lot of drama going on. You've been hearing about that? And Riley's like, yeah, I don't care about that. I need to talk to you. And she, like, pulls him into a classroom, which, first of all, if I was some random person that was into the Instagram and I saw them go into a classroom alone, I'd be like, ooh.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
No, someone saw that and was like, should we should we send it to the Instagram? Should we, like, send it?
Literally.
And their friend is like, we
God.
didn't get a photo. Like, what are you going to do? Go over there and take a photo? And they're like, no, let's just go to lunch.
Yeah. No, but literally, like, I'm sure someone had to have seen it. Like,
Yeah.
and for good reason, I'd be like, what?
Yeah, like, and to the
Why
point
are
where,
they-
like, Charlie is probably almost like, oh my God, like, why is she pulling me in here? Like, is she going to kiss me? And then, like, slightly
He's like,
dying.
ah!
Yeah.
He's about to have played himself way too hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she does not do that, thankfully. But she does. What I love about her here is that she is, like I said, she's channeling a little bit of that future Riley, where she's just like, so what the hell's going on? Like, do you like me? What's this thing that you have going on with me? And I'm like, good for you, Riley.
Go for it.
She's just like wants to know, like, what are you trying to say? What's going on? And Charlie, the moment he realizes that she's asking, like, do you want to date me? He gets very freaked out, and he, like, you know, gently pulls away from her and is like, no, no, we're just friends. No, don't worry about it. Even though I'm going to continue to perpetuate it behind her back, but don't worry. No, just friends. And it's like, okay, great. But Riley's like, you know, you don't seem very concerned about all the things people are saying about us. Like, what's that about? And Charlie's like, well, you know, same thing. Can't control rumors as long as it's not problematic. It's not really worth stressing over, is it? And then he has this very awfully awkward line where he says, I mean, if it were true, you and me, would that be the worst thing in the world? And Riley is like, I gotta go. I don't want to talk about this. Because, again, he's kind of going back and forth here.
Yeah,
like, he's really sending
no,
mixed
we're
signals.
Just friends. But then he's like, but would it be that bad? And she's like,
right.
She's so confused.
She's like, yes, it would be.
It would, because you're a confusing guy and also just entirely not for me. TYSM.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah, but also I think, you know, I've had a couple people kind of be like, you know, I'm not sure, like, why did he say that line? And I did highlight it in red, pink for foreshadowing irony. And it's because, to me, I think when he is saying that line, yes, it's a little bit of, like, continuing to pull the thread and just, you know, kind of keep Riley off her step. But the real reason I think is that he is kind of saying a truth there.
Yeah.
Because if it could be that way, if he could love Riley and they could be a couple and they could be this perfect, beautiful, heterosexual thing,
yeah,
would that be so terrible?
He's
could
like,
it be that easy?
He's like, that would be great. That would be the best thing to happen to me for a while, because I would finally be who everyone thinks I am.
Right, and I think there's a truth to that as well, of, like, not just it would perceive that way, but I think part of him, I mean, this is one of the hard things with, like, internalized homophobia and, you know, not being comfortable with yourself, is, like, he's like, I wish it was that way. I wish I wasn't dealing with this. I wish I was into Riley and it could just be that simple. But, alas.
Poor Charlie. That brings us to this offensive moment that you have.
Yes. So Riley leaves, understandably. Charlie, a very interesting moment at the beginning here, at least wrote this that I think is interesting, where he is, like, you know, keeping on the nice smile and, like, goodbye, and then the moment she's gone, it drops. And we get this, like, totally unrehearsed just image of Charlie for a second, where he looks not smiley and not charming and not, you know, just very much more human.
Yeah.
And even though we don't really yet understand, like, whoa, what's that coming from? Like, you get this sense of, like, something is wrong with him. Like, something is up. I don't know what's going on. I mean, some people do know what's going on. But, like, you know, like, there's just, like, whoa, okay, he just dropped that so fast. It alludes kind of back to the same thing of the Farkle in the premiere of him practicing his smile in the mirror and then putting it away and then practicing it and putting it away. It's that exact same kind of thing of there's a facade here.
Yes.
And then we get into this performance, which is Dirty Little Secret by All American Rejects.
Great
song. I literally hate myself for only writing about 3 sentences for this performance, when in actuality, it is one of the best of season 1. It is such an important performance. Yeah. It's the first Charlie solo performance. It's
you should
the
be
first.
Ashamed. You should be very ashamed.
I
for
am.
What you did.
I've I have said that potentially. I mean, right now I can't because we're working on season 4, but I have thought to myself like maybe at some point I will go back and I will build this out because it is so important.
Yeah.
So I will talk a little bit about it here. So to feed that a bit, but first, I wanted to say Punk Charlie Rise. Let's just put that out there first. I think this is what I love about that is that if you look at Charlie and the way that we've seen him so far, if he's gonna sing, you're expecting like Shawn Mendes or like, you know, like very much maybe
Josh
a little
Groban.
like yeah, exactly. Like it should be very like kind of
James
pop.
Blunt, sort of.
You're expecting something like that, which he does kind of do later. Like he does Riptide, you know, like that's kind of what you're expecting. That is not what you get. What you get is punk rock, 2000s, All American Rejects, and it's like, to me, what I love about that is that it's a musical metaphor for what's going on with him, which is that what you're seeing on the outside is not what's on the inside. Mm-hmm. This is what's inside Charlie, is this like anger, this frustration, this, you know, just loudness that he doesn't have the right or the wherewithal to express in his real life.
Yeah.
And I'll say to that as well, that's one thing that I really like about this idea of a future where where Charlie and Lucas are friends, because you think there's nothing similar about them, but this is a song that could very easily be on Lucas's one playlist.
Definitely.
Of angry rock music, you know? So I think it's like there is a part of Charlie that is that inside him, and that's very authentic.
Yeah,
but
I mean, they both
locked.
have anger. Yeah. I think it's another thing that cracks me up about this now is like it's making me remember how when we would have these episodes when they first came out and you would post them like this and not describe, I would just sit here and like listen to the music and like stop reading, because if I kept going then the music was where it wasn't meant to be. So I had to literally just stop and reread these 3 sentences like throughout the entire song.
God. I'm so sorry. No, yeah, the thing that sucks about this is that I think just at the time, again, I was just not thinking that deeply. And, you know, Charlie as well, we talked about this in our intro podcast episode, that he really became much more deep and much more of a huge focal piece of the show after, as we started getting into things. Like in season 1, we were not thinking that much about him. He did not get as much outline room as other people did. And so I think that contributed here. But looking back on it now, it's like I do have a vision for it in my head, and it's like the way I kind of see this performance is very much, you know, like him, it says, you know, in the hallways, so yes, he's in the hallways, but kind of like, again, very energetic, which is like something that we don't really see from him yet. It's like an early sprout version of what will come to be Superstar in season 3, where he's like totally lost it and is like rolling around on the floor and like in the leather pants and like just totally screaming that out. And this is like kind of the early version of that. It's larvae.
Funny because it makes me think of like sort of Bet on It for like the like preamble to Scream for Troy.
Yes, totally.
Yeah,
so we're getting that sense of that. And a detail that I think is so specific is like that I wish was written in here, but again, maybe it would have been too obvious that if it was written in there. But this idea of, as he's going through the hallways, all these lines about like, you know, these thoughts I can't deny, and it's the best way we survive, fragile lies, like this idea of his gaze and where it's going, and like if it lands on a male classmate, does it linger a little bit and then he looks away, versus like is he forcing himself to look in a certain direction, and it's just all, and that can like tie into choreography as well, of like, you know, head turn.
Yes.
And I just think like that element of it, of like, if, say, for example, let's say he's walking in the hallway doing this performance and Zay happens to pass by him and he goes behind him, you have that thing of like, oh, I see him, I'm gonna let my gaze linger a little bit and then whip away from it. Like that's something that I wish had been included in this early piece of it here, because that is so key to it in my head, is the lingering gaze, let's say.
Yeah, what do you think? I mean, because I can't remember exactly, but I do feel like I was kind of sure I knew what was going on with Charlie. But would it be, because I know it's sort of like kept a little dirty little secret, but would it be so bad if it was that obvious?
It's interesting because I think for some people it would be obvious, and for others it would not, because I mean, I've definitely had people who have said, you know, either in comments or just like in conversation, where like it feels, for people like us who are like very love to metatextualize and dig into things, or, you know, people like our friend Emma, who is very similar, who's a lit major and like loves to dig and also loves to find gays in TV. Like, I think if you're looking for it, you see it and it's very clear and you pick up on those hints. But there are definitely people that read this and are like, oh, I was surprised by like the way Charlie's story turned out. Like, they think like, oh, I genuinely thought that he did like Riley and was like being weird about it. And then they are surprised by it. So I think I like that. I like that it's kind of like, for some people, maybe you pick up on it and you get where it's going. And for others, it is like, oh, okay, like that's totally different. And I wouldn't want to overdo that, but I think to a certain degree, if you're picking it up, you're picking it up. And if you're not, you're just not yet. And that's fine.
Yeah. I think there would definitely be ways to do the choreography that would be like, you could have the sort of gaze of like lingering on Zay or others, and then also kind of enough that he was interacting with females that it wouldn't necessarily be like obvious what exactly was going on to some people.
Yeah, literally. And yeah, I just wish, this is one of those performances that I also just wish Ambition were real and we could see it, because for those that don't know, so Tanner, he, for a period of his life, he's so bizarre in a fun way, but he was in like a prog rock band, and he's very kind of punk rock, like, is the truth. He's and kind of, I would love to see him do this. Like, I think he would be so good. He
would kill it. He would be like so into this. He'd be like, this is my favorite performance. You know that he
season 1.
Yeah, of season 1, obviously.
Because then I'm sure, I mean, he would eat up Superstar. He would be so good. Oh my god. Yeah. But yeah, so this is just one of those ones that, one of my favorites, one of my all-time favorites of season 1. It deserved more. I repent for that.
I forgive you.
But it thank you. Will God forgive me? We'll find out. But I mean,
will God forgive Charlie?
Yeah, great question. Maybe we're both gonna repent together. So for very different reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love this song. Hate myself for not writing more for it. Blowing a kiss to Charlie, punk rock Charlie.
We love him.
Hello, listener. It's Maggie. Thank you for listening to our podcast, Ambition Unpacked. And this is the end of part 1 of this episode. Make sure to tune in next time, a couple weeks from now, for part 2. And then we will be back on track as we continue to move forward through the season. This is a pilot of testing out if we wanted to do 2-part episodes, because sometimes we talk very long. When we recorded this one, it was 3 hours, and I was like, we need to split this up. So let us know if this length felt better to you. If you don't mind the really long episodes, that is super helpful for us. And otherwise, have a great couple weeks. Season 4 is coming, so get excited. All right, bye.
True. We're all waiting for the Forever in Your Mind reunion. It's true.
Yeah.
We're just patiently waiting. Ricky, Liam, Emery, if you're out there, we're waiting.
If you hear this, if anyone hears this who could get this message to them, we are waiting.
Oh my goodness. We really are.